Welcome to this review slash retrospective for Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, the game I just got done playing a complete playthrough for. And normally I kind of have to worry a little bit about getting distracted while playing the game in the background like this. But I'm going to be honest with y'all, I'm so overpowered at this point of the game, nothing can pretty much touch me. So I should be able to compose all my thoughts without any issues here. But anyway, without further ado, let's actually get into the review of the game. And well, I guess at the very beginning, let me just go ahead and start with the graphics and the sound to the game, because that's kind of the more basic aspects, I'd say. And I think there was like one review on Steam for some reason that I saw recently, and not just a few days ago, really. And well, probably more than a few days ago, maybe a week or so ago now. And they said how much the game looked bad, and I just thought to myself, I was like, "Well, we playing the same game because it looks great to me." I mean, the graphics are very crisp and I don't know, very well detailed. I think it from a graphical perspective, this game looks amazing. So I don't know why some people would be overly critical of the look of the game, but I mean, it's obviously far superior to pretty much any of the other 2D Castlevania games that came before it. I mean, you've got probably more than a decade of improved technology that they're using because this is using the Unreal Engine, and and there's just a lot of it's a 2.5D game, so that's there are some 3D elements to it, but I mean, most of the 3D elements are, you know, just like what you can see here, the background and whatnot. But at its heart, it's still basically a 2D game. Um, the Tower of Twin Dragons is probably the most 3D aspect of the game, and even it was really at the end of the day, it was really just a 2D level with pretty substantial 3D effects thrown in there, basically. That's funny. Now, so yeah, I don't really know what some people be complaining about from a graphical perspective because I just think this game looks great. That's my own personal opinion. Um, Now, the music, I don't think I've heard anybody say anything negative about the music, and how could you? I mean, it's the same composer that was on most, if not, well, yeah, I'd say most of the previous Castlevania games. Which her, I think Michiru Yamane. I probably just completely and totally butchered her name, so I do apologize for that. Um, there aren't the familiar Castlevania tunes, but the ones that she composed and came up with here are extremely memorable. And I think the soundtrack for this game is just, well, it's great. But you kind of expect that from her at this point, really. Um, Now, I will say there is some interesting places in this soundtrack that kind of remind me of E's game to a certain extent, and well, that's another bonus in my book because I love the E's music as well. So yeah, there's really nothing negative I can say about this game from a graphical or um, audio perspective. I mean, it's just great. I mean, it's definitely a very modern looking game. So if that's what you're looking for, you're definitely going to get it here. Now, I guess the people that were complaining might have been, wanting a fully 3D game, but that's not what people wanted. Well, fans of Castlevania wanted a good 2D game, and that's what we got here. So, yeah, I have no qualms whatsoever with the direction of the game um, from that perspective. Now, story perspective, from a storyline, there's a couple things I'd like to point out for me. I think that it was a really good thing to play the Curse of the Moon games first, because once you get through playing this, you realize the Curse of the Moon games were the happy alternative story to this timeline. And yeah, it was interesting to see basically how different the story was in this game compared to the two Curse of the Moon games. And I'm not, I'm not going to say that the story was the main focus here, because I don't think the story has ever really been the main focus for most of these Metroidvania games. It's definitely a good story, and there's a few twists here and there, but it's not anything groundbreaking or anything. So if that's what you try to come in here for, expecting a groundbreaking story, you might be a little bit disappointed. It's good, don't get me wrong. In fact, you might even say it's very good, but it's not going to win any Oscars or anything at the end of the day, kind of thing. Now let's see here. So yeah, storyline good. Definitely not quite as happy, for lack of a better word, than as the Curse of the Moon games, but it's still a very good storyline, unless your name happens to be Jeeble. Um, so let's see here. Yeah, I just think the game is very very fun. And I guess that's, at the end of the day, that's truly the best aspect of these games that you're looking for. You want to have something that's a fun game, and it's a very in-depth game, I'd say, as well, because it has a very detailed crafting system. And you know, I want to say this. Yeah, it's got a very detailed crafting system, but at almost no point in the game, in dealing with the crafting system, did I feel like it was, I guess, a chore. And that I guess is one of the better signs of the game right there, is the fact that you don't feel like it's a chore to do all the crafting stuff. In fact, you're kind of encouraged to do it. I mean, you want to do it because you realize that you can become so much more powerful with a crafting system. In fact, I'd say the difficulty of the game is one of those that is fairly, um, I guess, when you compare it to, say, the Curse of the Moon games, and how I talked about the Curse of the Moon games, and the first one was just way too easy, and the second one kind of ramped up the difficulty to, you know, obscene levels. This one it really is kind of the in the middle Goldilocks level of difficulty level, because it's really good. Especially early on. I mean, there are definitely some fights that were difficult, and I had to play through them a few times. But like most Metroidvania games, especially ones that Iga has worked on, getting to the point where you can become overpowered is something that you can easily do fairly early on. To be honest with you, well, I'm saying not early on. It did take me quite a while to get to the point where I was extremely overpowered. But you know, I think the shard system is really interesting, and the and it's the passive um, yellow shards. Those are the ones that can be abused, as it were, to make it so that you can pretty much cheese the system, really. And and that's kind of what I did. So by the time I got to the end of the game, I was pretty grossly overpowered, if we're being honest. And that's fine, because I enjoyed being grossly overpowered. Um, the So I mean, it definitely is more challenging, but at the same time, it can be very simple if you know what you're doing. So I just want to make that point clear here. I'm actually trying to figure out how to get to that treasure chest. Oh, there it is. So anyway, other than that, let me see here. Is it a very guide-heavy game? I'd say probably not, actually. There were moments that I had to look some things up in the guide, but for the most part, the guides that I used were mostly to get some rare components if I wanted to craft something, or something along those lines, basically. But if you just want to play through the game and get from the beginning to the end, do you really need a guide to play through it? And I don't think that the answer to that is yes, because I think you can pretty much get through the majority of the game without a guide pretty easily, I'd say. I'm trying to see that wolf man over there. He wants me to kill him. I know he does. There he is. Anyway. If only I didn't have invert. So, I mean, there were a few instances. Well, what they would do is they would give you hints at the store with Dominique. And that happened quite a bit, actually, where she would give me a hint or an arrow, as it were, from Zangetsu. And I guess that's something I do want to point out. I think the characters in this game, well, I was very familiar with pretty much all of them, to be honest with you. And I definitely think the characters are really cool for the most part. I just everything from that perspective is definitely very well done. They definitely fleshed them out more than they did in Curse of the Moon, which is kind of to be expected, honestly. But definitely a good storyline as far as that's concerned, and much better character development than in Curse of the Moon. But I'm trying to think, is there anything truly negative about this game that I can say? And at the end of the day, I mean, there were a few rare spawns that I did come across that were a bit annoying. I would say getting the shard from the 8-bit Overlord is probably the more annoying thing that I did in this game. It probably took me killing that stupid boss somewhere in the vicinity of like 50 or more times before I finally got that shard drop. I killed him a lot of times. But, and also flying beef, that was one of those that was actually, oddly enough, fairly rare to come by. I don't know why that one was so rare to come by, but that was another one that I had to kill a lot of those flying cows in the Oriental Sorcery Lab to get. Don't know why it was such a rare drop for that, but really other than those two things, the farming for shards and or drops was nothing that ever really took an extremely long time. Actually, I could pull that up real quick. And here's another thing which is really neat, and I do want to point this out. If you go to the archive section, well, first of all, I could tell you how far you are in completing all the stuff here. But this is a very good guide, and also in-game guide, I should say, and that helps out substantially when you're looking for something. So just going through here, you can tell whether or not a demon has a shard or whatnot. But if you're looking for something in particular, you can click on the demon and you find out what they drop and roughly what the drop rate is. Now, like any other Castlevania game, pumping up your luck improves your drop chances for things. And so obviously I have maximized that. So you can, well, if you know you have to go for a certain demon, like, let's see here, I was going for a hat that only the Wolfman dropped. You can click on it and it not only tells you what they drop, but it tells you where they are as well. So if you know there's a specific demon you're looking for, you can just look it up in the archives. You can look up in the archives and figure out what they drop, where they are. I mean, not that it really matters, you can even get their stats there on the side. I mean, once you get to a certain level of nastiness, all that stuff really doesn't matter. There's a lot of stuff in the game to craft, as you can tell here. I didn't think, I mean, when crafting all the armors and whatnot, there really isn't a lot in that regards. There's way more weapons, and I have quite a bit of weapons. And I will also give some links that I did have in the that I used here. I don't want to make it sound like it's an extremely guide heavy game, because I did use them here and there, but it wasn't something that I had to come back to on a regular basis. For instance, all the maps on GameFAQs, the only time I really needed to access those from a completion perspective was like, say, oh, I missed a hidden room. Where's this hidden room? And you just pull up the map file. Oh, okay, there it is. I just missed this one room there. And I was literally at 99.8% on the map before I actually really had to start using those maps, honestly. Or sometimes you might want to access the maps to find out if there's going to be a save room close by. Well, I use that quite a bit because in my case, I didn't want to take an extremely long time to get to a save room, because I try to keep the videos to a relatively good runtime, I'd say, so that they didn't get too ridiculously long. So that's kind of why I would do that. Is like, if I was just sitting there playing the game to play the game, I don't think that's something that I would truly really worry that much about, because you're going to get to a save room eventually. They're there, even though I did accidentally bypass quite a few save rooms for a minute there. So it's not a huge thing to need all those maps. The walkthrough that I will link to you all from GameFAQs, it's pretty decent. And actually, I'd say it is a good walkthrough, but at the end of the day, it's also one of those that I don't feel was entirely, necessary, as it were, for, completionist perspective. The Bloodstained wiki was actually pretty good, and in fact, I've been using it probably quite a bit more frequently because of the crafting that I'm doing now for a completionist perspective. But outside of crafting, I never really accessed the wiki for pretty much of anything. Well, I take it back. For Abigail's quest, I did have to figure out where to get the ribbon from, and so I think I went to the wiki to figure that one out. So there were a few things here and there, but once again, it's mostly for optional content that you would have needed it, and not anything truly necessary to complete the game. Without me actually even delving into a lot of the optional content and completing the shards and whatnot, I had already become pretty grossly overpowered just by um, binding the passive shards myself, because once you start doing that, you start to get really, well, mean and almost untouchable, really. And I pretty much did all that with hints from the game, not from anything that I had to read online, basically. So, yeah, I'd say this game, difficulty-wise, it's moderate, but it also is one of those that you can very quickly um, get overpowered, just like any other, Castlevania type Metroidvania. Now, as far as a score for this game, if you're a fan of Castlevania, there's no reason not to play this game. Now, for me, I kind of put it off for a little while because I wanted to play a lot of the Castlevania games that I missed first, and I had a very good feeling that if I got around to playing this game, especially from a graphics perspective, it would put a lot of those in the dust. And to be honest, you see, I play a lot of retro games, so having the greatest graphics in the world isn't the end all and be all for me. But it truly is an evolution, as it were, of the Castlevania formula, and an amazing job. Actually, if there's another criticism I would levy at the game, it would probably be some of the DLC, or not really DLC, but added content that they added to the game after the fact. It doesn't really count towards your achievements, which actually I don't. Like I said, I wouldn't say that's necessarily a bad thing. Um, that is something where I guess I've been a little spoiled, as it were, using the Retro Achievements website, because what they'll do sometimes is they'll have subsets, and so it'd be really cool, I think, to have a subset for those extra playthrough styles, like the Zangetsu mode, and I don't know the name of the other person. It's from a different game, and I have no idea what her name is, so I apologize. I don't know what her name is. Aurora? That's what it is. It's Aurora. So there's a Zangetsu mode and an Aurora mode that you can play. And there's from an achievement perspective, there's no reason to do either of those. But I will say also, it's really nice that they gave you those modes for free. You didn't have to actually pay for the DLC for them. So from that perspective, that's actually a very generous thing that the team did there. They did say they're looking at creating a Ritual of the Night 2. So I definitely would be interested to see what they do as far as Ritual of the Night 2 is concerned, because this is going to be a really hard game to follow up. I have a feeling the team behind it can do that, though, and I look forward to seeing what they do, because as far as a Metroidvania style game, I'd say this is about as flawless as it gets. It's just fun all the way around, and even the stuff that you would think is probably more tedious is something that I actually kind of enjoyed. I did like the farming aspect of the game, and I never really felt, like, crap, I got to do a whole bunch of farming now. It actually was enjoyable for almost the whole part. And one thing that probably wasn't quite as enjoyable was trying to get the gold here in the desert. But other than that, it's it's just a great game. I highly recommended it. I would highly recommend it. Excuse me, and I would say definitely I give it a perfect score. I love this game. It's great, and I would recommend everybody give it a shot. I think the standard price is probably around the $30 range or so. It's definitely worth that. Um, But I also, like a lot of things, I got it for sale, and it does go on sale quite often. So at that price, it's definitely worth it. Um, the soundtrack, yeah, definitely get the soundtrack. I think it's one of the better soundtracks in just about any video game. I love listening to it. So that's from a DLC perspective, the soundtrack is definitely worth it. Iggy's backpack, I'm a little on the fence about. I guess a lot of this Valkyrie gear that you see me wearing, I think comes from the Iggy's backpack. And if that's the case, then it's probably worth it as well, because that does improve your luck. The Valkyrie sword that you can get, it it's not that great. I mean, after you have a red beast like I do, pretty much nothing really compares to that, with the exception of a few great swords here and there. Um, oh, I do want to talk about Linux performance. Now, if you have this on Steam using the standard Proton, you should be good to go. Um, it and when I say standard Proton, at the time of this video, that would be like a 7.0 dot. I think it's 7.0-4 if I got my my dots and dashes in the right spot, and and it should work just fine. Now, for me, I bought this game on GOG, so what I had to do, and as you notice, I said in the description of every video, I said using bottles. And so there's a Linux program called Bottles that you can kind of set up a bit of a virtual environment, for lack of a better word, and set things up. Now, they have a very highly customized version of Proton that they call Soda. But for the most part, it's just got a minor bit of adjustments. It's still mostly standard Proton, all things considered. And that's what I was using to do this. So I had to install the GOG Galaxy client so I could get the achievements, and it did work using Soda 7.0-4. It did work pretty much flawlessly. Well, I wouldn't say flawlessly. There is one issue I have had with the GOG client via that, and that is cloud saves. It doesn't work very good, if at all, with cloud saves on with bottles. I tried doing it via Lutris, and Lutris wasn't getting what installed the client, but I wasn't getting achievements. So if I'm not getting achievements, what's the point of installing the client via Lutris? So that's why I swapped over to Bottles, because at least Bottles, I did get the achievements, and that's really, at the end of the day, that's really what I was more focused on anyway. So I think from a Linux perspective, if you have a choice, get this on Steam. And I kind of hate having to say that. I mean, I do like Steam, don't get me wrong. Steam's a good storefront. But you would think with GOG being DRM free that it would be one of those things that would be kind of like a no-brainer for them to have good Linux support. And at the end of the day, I mean, I backed up my saves manually, for a worst case scenario. But it's one of those things that I just wish GOG would put out a Linux client, even if you could only play. I don't know. I mean, they haven't done a good job of supporting the Linux community, and at this point, I don't know if I would put my faith in them as a storefront to actually ever truly support Linux. Whereas, Steam, on the other hand, has done nothing but provide huge amounts of support to the Linux community. So definitely from a Linux standpoint, right now Steam is the way to go. And for this game, I have a feeling that default Steam will work just fine, because that's basically what I was using in bottles, and it worked pretty much flawlessly for me. So anyway, I think that's pretty much all my thoughts on the game. It's a perfect Castlevania style Metroidvania, and something that I definitely highly recommend to everybody. And if you're playing this on a Steam Deck, well, I have a feeling it'll probably run pretty well on the Steam Deck. The Steam Deck stats are not quite as good as what I'm running, even though my computer is very old. But if you have a decent computer, you'll get maximum, visual quality and everything out of this game with very little effort. It's a great game. Yeah, like I said, my computer's like 10 years old. I mean, the video card's not quite 10 years old, but I still get, maximum performance out of it. So Linux perspective, no problem whatsoever with this game. I think it is something that pretty much anybody should be, able to play and willing to play, because it's an awesome game. Anyway, that's my thoughts on the game. Maybe a little bit of rambling there, but I think I got everything in there. Well, thanks for watching this video. I'll see y'all in the next one. Take care.